Welcome to Speechless. We're glad to have you on today. And we will be discussing three issues. And one is the Little Canada case where a U.S. citizen, using his constitutional rights, videotaped an arrest, which turned out to be in a medical emergency. And a police officer came over, a deputy came over and said, "Turn off the camera." He refused. And he was arrested for disorderly conduct and one other issue, which we will talk about later today, tonight. So, and Judge Edward Wilson in Ramsey County issued an order, a pre-trial hearing, a motion to suppress or dismiss, and he did not dismiss for various reasons, and we're going to discuss some of those. So, is Judge Edward Wilson correct in his decision-making here? I don't believe so. I think he's just should have dismissed the case. It shouldn't be brought, and the people in Little Canada, it's going to cost you a lot of money for defending. There's the Judge Edward Wilson there. So let's get into this Little Canada case. So you're outside, you're on your property, you're out where you're living, and all of a sudden an ambulance shows up and the police show up and they bring a man out of his apartment, and they're out front in the street, and police start frisking him and placing him in handcuffs. Have you seen that picture on TV at all? Have you seen that before? Well, yeah, you see that all the time. That is space open to the public. It's not private property. It's open to the public. Once you're out in the open, you're out in the open. Anybody can film you and do what they want to do. You know, paparazzis, you know, they do it all the time. They do get in trouble when they violate somebody's constitutional rights. So this man in Little Canada films this, what looks like to be an arrest, and which is perfectly correct for him to do. But the sheriff, a deputy, comes over and says, "You turn off that camera." And actually, she said, told him to put the camera down, and if I end up on YouTube, I'm going to be upset. Now, we're in the process of trying to get this video and this audio to play it on here, and eventually it will be up on YouTube, so I might upset her. However, too bad. You know, so this man says, I have a right to do this. And this was Deputy Molnar. I got the first name here. Jacqueline Molnar told this to the man. And she retired now after 33 years with the Sheriff's Department. So, or Little Canada, I don't know whether she was Little Canada or the Sheriff's Department for Ramsey County, I don't know. But either way, the city is prosecuting this man. And he's being charged with disorderly conduct and interfering with an ambulance crew. Okay, this is interesting. Disorderly conduct and interfering with an ambulance crew, and he's just standing 30 feet away filming. Now, they're going to say he was within 5 feet filming, but I don't believe they have any evidence for this. So he's being charged with these crimes, and of course, let's consider what disorderly conduct is: offensive, obscene, abusive, boisterous, or noisy conduct that the actor knows or has reason to know would tend to alarm, anger, or disturb others, or provoke an assault or breach of peace. Okay, and this is what needs to be discovered. Now, if the deputy is coming over and saying, stop filming, and that's all he's doing, which is all the evidence so far suggests, she's out of order. Okay, she's violating his constitutional rights. He has a right to defend his constitutional rights. Now, he wasn't doing anything to incite the officer and for the officer to arrest him. He was just filming. And one of the ambulance drivers was disturbed that he was filming and mentioned it to the deputy. Well, so what if he's disturbed that they're being filmed? It ended up being a medical emergency in this case, and so interfering with an ambulance crew. Well, how is filming an ambulance crew interfering with an ambulance crew? You see that happen all the time on the news. The ambulance is in the background or in the foreground, they're taking a person. There's no right to privacy if it's out in the public. But because the deputy escalated it and he said, no, I'm not going to, then they're coming after him. So that's what's going on. And so as a rightful defense, his name is Andrew Henderson, put in a motion to dismiss the charges, in which a judge can decide on, according to our law. And this was Edward Wilson. And here's what Judge Edward Wilson of Ramsey County said. And if you can put his graphic up any time, his picture up again. He cannot be shielded, Andrew Henderson cannot be shielded under the cloak of the First Amendment. And that's exactly right. What I understand him saying is that you can't scream fire in a movie theater when there's no fire because you're going to incite a riot, that type of thing. Okay, so you can't say, I have free speech rights, I have the freedom to film this because he does blogging, he's part of the press or whatever. I have freedom of the press, I have free speech rights. You can't charge me with this crime because I was doing what was in my constitutional rights. Well, you can do what's in your constitutional rights for free speech, but we also have laws against slander. You can't lie. You can't lie against somebody purposefully and knowingly. So there's where the kind of situation where you just can't say whatever you want. Matter of fact, swearing in public is a disorderly conduct. It is not protected by the Constitution or the law. It's not a free speech right because you have the right to peacefully assemble. When you're doing things that aren't peacefully, then you don't have that right. So Judge Wilson is correct. He can't be shielded under the cloak of the First Amendment for a behavior that may be unconstitutional, may violate somebody's other constitutional amendment rights. But in this case, what did he do to violate somebody else's constitutional right? That's the question. Okay, so far in this story, it's just a deputy not liking that he's filming something he has the right to film. Or does he have the right to film it? Okay, so the judge also goes on to say, it is not necessary that one engage in a physical act to interfere or obstruct. That's reasonable. You can just be standing there yelling, harassing, waving, and obstructing. Now, is filming something, does that raise to the level of interference or obstruction? Are you getting in the way of the people doing their job by your filming? Are you blocking them? Of course, there still would have to be intent in this. But all the evidence so far is showing, no, he wasn't in that area. He wasn't around them. He was far enough away, 30 feet, more than plenty of room to do their job in filming. So the judge is correct in what he's saying, but does it apply? And that's what the judge was to determine in this case. Was there enough evidence to show that he was interfering or obstructing? And then the judge goes on to, Judge Edward Wilson says, it is sufficient if the defendant's action or conduct had the effect of physically obstructing or interfering with a member of an ambulance crew. So that was one of the charges, interfering with a member of the ambulance crew. Okay, but did they provide evidence that he had done that? They have the film. They can show that. whether he was or not. And so, but the whole thing is that he wasn't. It was the deputy that was creating the scene, and it was the ambulance crew that was creating the scene. If they would have just done their job, and this guy was far enough away filming that he wasn't interfering with anything. He wasn't in the line of path. He wasn't, what was going on here. So the judge is playing a line here. What he's saying is true, but does it apply? Okay, now, so the judge in his assessment was ruling that the recording of a medical assessment by paramedics in Andrew Henderson's case is not constitutionally protected speech. But he doesn't say why. And he says that is different from other cases in which a defendant videotapes police carrying out their duties. So they're not getting him on him videotaping the police, handcuffing him, but it is getting them on the ambulance carrying out their duties. And that's not protected speech. You know what? That's a bunch of baloney. The judge here is saying that he didn't do anything to interfere with the crew. The judge here is implying, and it's going to be interesting to see what evidence gets before that jury, if there's jury instructions, if this judge is given this kind of jury instructions in this case, that filming medical assessments by paramedics out in the public is not constitutionally protected speech. If the judge is saying that, he's dead wrong. Anything out in the public is to be filmed is a free speech right. So it will be interesting, that case, to see what it goes forward here. But Little Canada, you're going to pay for it. You're going to pay big time. They should drop this case. Of course, the deputy, Jacqueline Molnar, retired, and she may have a great history in the past, but it's just like somebody who's never murdered before, a great, decent person, but now they murder. Now they commit the crime. Well, do we still punish them? We don't go by their past and say, boy, this is a really good person all their life. But now they intentionally killed somebody, murdered somebody. There's a difference between killing and murdering somebody. They intentionally murdered somebody. Well, we throw them in jail for life, if they're convicted. But if a police officer has a great record, or a sheriff has a great record all their life, and then violate somebody's constitutional right once, that's a blot on their record. And of course, Jacqueline Molnar had the option to retire and did, but this should be looked at as whether she should be prosecuted or sued for violating this person's. I hope they're going to do that in this case. I don't like those things, but somebody has to hold our government accountable. And this Andrew Henderson is in the spot to do that, and hopefully he's getting legal help to do it. It looks like he is. All right, we have a caller on the line. Caller, do you have a comment or question?
Tim Kinley.
Yes.
Thanks for bringing this huge issue up on your show. I've picked up the paper and read that. Couldn't make much of what they were saying in the paper, but it did sound like the judge made it, like you said, a poor decision, poorly thought out, poorly argued, tried to think he had some sort of, fringe way to twist it, so he didn't have to protect somebody's constitutional rights, and he could be ambiguous. And of course, the sad, disfortunate, tragic part of the situation, the burden has been on somebody who is a law-abiding citizen, doing a civic duty and serving this community, and now the burden is on that person, and that is sad because it's a big expense, it's a lot of complication, and like you said, shame on Little Canada for pursuing this. It's going to put a lot of burden on this individual when he should be treated as a hero because he went the extra effort. And now with the government surveillance, surveilling everything, the cameras all over, surveilling internet, phone calls, invading everybody's privacy in all kinds of multitude of ways. and some guy serving his community takes a camera out there, and they jump on him like a bunch of gorillas and rats and force him in the corner, and the judge doesn't put a stop to it. That's a sad situation.
Well, and I mean, that's a huge point, and it leads right into the next part. What if there was a change in circumstances? What if this guy who had an alcohol level of 0.32 all of a sudden started beating up on the police, beating up on the medical emergency people, and banished a gun? Of course, the police officer searched him first. What if before that the police got to do the search, the guy banished a gun and pointed at the police officers, and the police shot him dead? That video would exonerate the police officers. So he was there protecting them, and they turn it around and abuse him. And it's protecting the ambulance drivers for false allegations that may have come up, for that man saying, you stole this, you did this, while I was in this state, you beat me up. So because that camera was there, that camera protected the police officers. And this is why I so much want cameras in our courtrooms, because judges get falsely accused of things. I think you're right, so it protects the judges.
Because you're right.
Yeah.
And they should, and I agree, they should be in the courtrooms because it protects everybody, but it generally protects the weakest party, because the weakest party, the less unfortunate party, generally doesn't have the money or the educational know-how or the connection to the system to preserve his constitutional rights. And constitutional rights in America should be more than just for the very wealthy or the people with connections. And unfortunately, everything in this country is being turned around. That the only way you get your constitutional rights in this country is if you can pay for your constitutional rights, and that's something that's supposed to be God-given and free. The other thing is, I got a comment on that issue. You hope as soon as the city is what they're doing. The problem with that, of course, would really be a suit in the federal court, because that's a constitutional issue. We know that all federal judges aren't term limited, so they, we know that most of them are pretty much in the bag of the government, because their checks come from the government, the federal government. And so good luck that federal judges ever going to, very seldom it's highly publicized when the federal judge actually rules on the side of the citizen.
Yes.
Against the government. It's always good to see, and I know the media makes that an heroic as if it's happening every day, but it doesn't happen. And again, to sue the government and then go into the federal government courts and try to prove your search, again, you have the heavy burden on you, and you have to win it 15 times and make it so obvious before you'll...
Right.
And I think that's the way the government looks at it, too.
Absolutely. Definitely that's the way to look at it. Yeah, very good. And your point about the weakest party, protects the weakest party. We don't know who the weakest party is going to be in these situations. We don't know. The weakest party may be the judge. The weakest party may be the police officer. The weakest party may be the citizen. We don't know who it will be until charges are brought out, and if it's video recorded, we have a lot better idea of who the weaker party is.
Oh no, and I know that the government in general is really not happy about all these, Silicon Valley and all their cameras and all that, and everybody walking around with cameras in their pocket on their phones, and the government definitely wants to find, in my mind, would like to find a way to clamp down on it, just like they clamped down in Minnesota last year when it used to be that if you wanted to get the emails that the government is passing out.
Right. Yep. All right. You're kind of breaking up there, so it's a little hard to hear you. So, all right. Thank you, caller. And, the big question, can you charge somebody for malicious prosecution? Malicious charging, I should say. And that happens. Of course, that's what they say. Well, it's just part of the negotiation process. We get plea deals, and it just saves everybody time and money. Well, does it You know, I mean, it's a racket, definitely. But, you know, there are honest people in the system that try to do a good job. I've met many of them. But then there are those that are just, you know, jerks, and they're going to do what they want because they want to.
If I end up on YouTube, I'm going to be upset.